We have flown the air like birds, and swum the sea like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth like brothers. Dr. Martin Luther King.
The war took my dad, war took my husband, everything I had.
Santa Monica region in the Pacific Ocean seashore is the main tourism resort of Los Angeles, which attracts a large number of domestic and foreign travelers and has become a recreative center. 4th of July, the American Independence Day, is celebrated in the US every year. But with regard to the active participation of American Marines who returned from Iraq, this year the ceremony turned into a demonstration against war.
The enemy was faceless, the country was scared, the government impatient, but boys were unprepared. Most families got their boys back in only body bags. The papers wouldn't even print coffins draped with flags.
My name is Jabbar Magruder. I served in Iraq between December 2004 to the end of October of 2005. I served with the California Army National Guard. I'm a Black Hawk helicopter mechanic.
My name is Jeff Key. I served in the Marine Corps since 2000, and I went to Iraq in March of 2003. I was there for a little over 2 months before I was medevaced home for surgery after a non-combat accident.
My name is Edgar Cuevas. I served in Iraq for 1 year from 2004 to 2005, and I served in Tikrit, Iraq.
I served in Al-Qaim, Iraq, on the Syrian border.
My name's Cameron. I was a Marine, and I served in the Iraq War on 2 separate occasions in the early part of the war.
My name is Eric Estenzo. I'm 32 years old. I went to Iraq in 2003, and I stayed there for 1 tour.
My name is Jason Lemieux. I participated in the invasion of Iraq. I invaded on March 21st, 2003.
My name is Larry Alperts, and I am a member of Veterans for Peace. I was in the U.S. Navy for 10 years, from 1982 to 1992.
You know, that we were pretty much sent over there under the bases looking for weapons of mass destruction, trying to prevent further tragedies. And so now we're over. It's like the mission is so convoluted that we won't be able to accomplish the goal of building a stable society. I feel that we have to immediately withdraw from Iraq because the mission statement is not going to, bring the troops home. I mean, that it's not going to accomplish the mission that it was set out to do. That the mission was, that we were going to go over there and look for weapons of mass destruction, but that did not exist, and so now we're not helping anybody anymore.
Moved with my unit up to Baghdad, where we cleared the Ministry of Oil, and after the invasion we moved down to Karbala.
And from my experience in that war, I learned that what we were bombing at that time had nothing to do with the military. We bombed the electrical power supply substations, the substations around the country, and we bombed the radio and television transmitters in parts of Baghdad. So I realized at that time this was not a war about military targets. We were targeting the civilian population.
And I was there for 5 months until September of 2003. My second tour was in Husayba from February to September of 2004, and my third tour was in Ramadi from September 2005 to March 30th, 2006.
It's initially started from Kuwait and moved all the way up to our final destination in Babel province.
I volunteered on the basis of what I understood to be the situation in Iraq. When I got there, that wasn't what I saw. What we were being told was not what I saw.
When we left the first tour, we had a very friendly relationship with the people in Karbala. We shopped at their restaurants. We paid them to use their satellite phones to call home. And 5 months later, we went to Husayba, which was in the Sunni Triangle, and it was very, very violent, and we weren't ready for that. And the first day we got there, we got mortared. And I remember for the first month, every single day we would get mortared, and we lived in a concrete building with a tin roof. So if one of the mortar rounds would have fell through, it would have landed in there and killed all of us. And we would sit there, and the rounds would come closer and closer and closer, and you would hear the explosions, and you could hear shrapnel hitting the tin on the roof. And I remember just sitting there with my armor on, totally helpless, and just thinking to myself, I didn't even know what to think. There was nothing I could do. Just sit there and hope that it just didn't hit me. And it was just terrifying, and there was just absolutely nothing to do but just sit there and hope for the luck of the draw.
Well, there were many tragic scenes, but one that really sticks out the most is doing some raids at night and even at the early morning, and knowing that we're going to places based on shady evidence or based on anonymous tips that there may be insurgents or there may be people who are affiliated with other people against coalition forces. Knowing that we were raiding houses and taking away people that were eligible for to be called as insurgents. Without having any solid evidence was probably the hardest thing, because it was just a heartbreaker to watch, fathers and, sons get taken away from their family while, the mothers and their sisters are screaming and crying and wondering why we're doing it, and not really giving them any good reason for it other than they may come back or they may not come back. And it's very heartfelt to me, because I know if it was in my situation and somebody came into my house, I would demand for a reason as to why it's happening. So that was one of the biggest impacts that I received when I was out there in Iraq. This is actually, it started off as a sketch. When I was in the Babel province, we raided a few houses in Diwania, and after our raid, we came back to our operating base, and we were then tasked with guarding these detainees before they were questioned and sent to another location. And as I was there guarding them, I just had this idea that, perhaps I should document this with my art. So I decided making a series of sketches of some of the detainees that we had. And this is one of the sketches that I've made. And when I came back home to the States, I then finalized the sketch as a charcoal piece. And it's done on the same paper. This is an actual detainee that I looked over while I was out there. So in terms of authenticity.
And the thing is, about going to fight off in Iraq. Before I left, it's like I bought a ring to propose to my girlfriend of 4 years and ask her to marry me. And when the orders finally came down, it finally came time for me to leave. She was terrified of the fact that I was going to be away for a year and a half to possibly gone for 2 years. And that whole aspect, just terrified and scared her to the point where she broke off the relationship. And, essentially I had to deploy to Iraq with a broken heart. And, and that, being stuck in that situation, not being able to grow out of it, completely stuck with me the whole time that I was there. And then also, speaking to my mother and my father on a regular basis, how they were completely just terrified about, the fact that, that a mortar or a rocket could land in my lap. And I spent most of my time trying to calm them down and tell them that I'm not driving around every day, faced with roadside bombs or faced with, having to, to go in somebody's house and being shot at. But that they were focusing on the small possibility that I could be hurt. And, but just listening to them and just the sheer terror in their voice and how the fact that I was in, such a precarious situation that was completely out of, completely in harm's way, completely out of the realm of understanding, that it stayed with them on a regular basis.
There wasn't a lot of that kind of combat in Iraq. Generally speaking, what killed the Marines in my unit were roadside bombs, IEDs. And there's nobody to fight back at when a bomb blows up on your vehicle.
Well, my personal fear was I almost died by an RPG flew over my head.
My arms were broken. I had a collapsed lung, pneumonia in the lungs, fluid around the heart. They removed my spleen. I had shrapnel on my right leg. That's about the extent of it.
So I haven't been physically injured, but in a sense I have been injured mentally because being out there in Iraq, I'm seeing some of the atrocities from a humanitarian standpoint, and from seeing, the innocent Iraqis being treated the way they are, and knowing that democracy is far from what they're getting today.
The most tragic scene I've seen was on April 17th, 2004. I was involved in a 12-hour firefight in Husayba where 3 members of my section were killed, and as I was standing on a rooftop, I glanced down into a courtyard and I saw the 3 of them laying there dead. And it surprised me because I was trying not to look at them, but I accidentally saw them. And then once I looked at them, I couldn't look away. And one of them was my roommate for a year. And he was laying there, and he just seemed so helpless. And he was a small guy, and so that was really hard for me.
Both my parents went through impending grief.
We got attacked by a sniper, and he was a good shot. He took out my right knee. And then as I was on the floor, he managed to shoot me in this spot right under my vest. And that went through my rib and took out my kidney and part of my colon.
And it's like, and they just didn't get the amount of frustration that I dealt with by being in a situation where I'm surrounded by people who are homesick, and the only thing that they have to do is to get the job done.
I've shot a rocket at an enemy sniper position. I don't know.
whole bunch of soldiers right now, you know, with all kinds of psychological problems, whether it's depression, whether it's bipolar. What happened to me is the result after Iraq. You know, my issues happened after Iraq.
I believe it was in part due to some of the trauma that I suffered there, and I have a lot of trouble relating to other people and to girls in particular. Mentally, I have a 30% disability rating for post-traumatic stress disorder with the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Now that I'm home, and it's been 3 years now, my PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is minuscule compared to what it used to be before. When I would sleep, you know, I would only get 4 hours of sleep at a time before I'd have anxiety attacks. And, you know, the smallest sound would wake me up and I would constantly search for my M16.
I mean, the one thing, I guess, the best thing I could share is this. This is in memorial of my friends who were killed in Iraq. And I don't know if you're aware, but this is the display that we set up for a memorial service after somebody dies. We take their boots and their rifle and their helmet. And so Never Forget is for me, never to forget them and the experiences that I went through, but it's also kind of a message for anybody who sees this to never forget the cost of war, that if you really support a war and you really think it's a good idea, this is what you're supporting. And you have to accept the fact that you are sending people who will die, and you have to have that on your head for the rest of your life.
And for that, I am personally and professionally sorry, and I offer my apologies to the soldiers, the families, the civilian and military leadership of the Army and the Department of Defense, and to the nation.
3,500 American troops to this day have perished in Iraq, including a conservative estimate of 600,000 Iraqis have died, and this is all in the name of a lie.
My father was a Marine, and he served in Vietnam.
Roberto Ramos.
And so I think that he believes it was wrong. He doesn't believe I should have went because there was no clear reason for going. Just like with him in Vietnam, he didn't know why he was there, and I told him I didn't know why I was going to Iraq. And my mother is definitely against the war in Iraq.
My name is Charles Nixon, and I was in the Vietnam War in 1966 and 1967. I was a medic, and I drove an ambulance, and I worked at an evacuation hospital. And what I'm doing here is we work on this project every week, which is a memorial to the soldiers, the American soldiers that have died in Iraq.
We are Iraq Veterans Against the War!
Been commissioned by U.S. peace-seeking groups, published the names of U.S. casualties in Iraq. It also described how and where they were killed.
It was clear. You can see the well-dressed families on Memorial Day, reading the names on the wall, all those who went away, who went on the ship. Came back in a bag, packed into a coffin, wrapped up in a flag.
And there was just this one Marine that we had from our unit that did die, but unfortunately, he was he was immediately medevac, so we didn't have a chance to see him. But at the location, he died. So that was probably the closest thing that I got to actually, seeing something that was someone seriously injured.
Beside an unused union hall and an abandoned factory. By the hour,
worked out a deal with me reserves to trust the PD yesterday. I mean, it was clear.
You can see the well-dressed families on Memorial Day, reading the names on the wall. All those who went away, who went on the ship.
To the wounded warriors here today and to all of your fellow wounded warriors around this nation, thank you for what you have given your country. There are those who speak about you who say, he lost an arm, he lost a leg, she lost her sight.
They claimed psychological reasons, and they were shunned. I mean, the unit, there was nothing officially that the unit could do to punish them, but all of their friends, or what used to be their friends, shunned them, and so they were outcast from everybody else in the unit.
How much of a reality it was for me. Like getting up every day at 4 hours of sleep and being alarmed and having anxiety and looking for my weapon and, having flashbacks while driving on a freeway, which would be reminiscent of driving on the freeways in Baghdad. Certain situations would trigger similarities of what I've done in Iraq. 4th of July or New Year's would constantly ring a familiar sound of explosions and firecrackers, and they would, it would just bring me back to the, to the times that I was there in Iraq. If I had to go back to Iraq, well, I would go public for one thing, and I would then announce that, the military is now sending me back to Iraq, a war that I consider is unjust and immoral, and a place that I don't want to go in terms of like fighting against countrymen and women who just want to have democracy. I would do whatever I can legally to resist my deployment. And that usually begins with media coverage and, writing a letter to my congressman and speaking about, the reasons why I don't want to go.
Right now I'm like what's called the inactive ready reserve. And so if I got recalled, which is where they would take me back and put me onto active duty, because I still have a year left of that, I mean, there is things they could do. They could try and change my discharge to like a other than honorable or a dishonorable or something like that, but it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I would still be an objector and not go back to Iraq if they told me I had to.
My opinion about the presence of the soldiers in Iraq and also the Marines and other branches is that our presence there fuels the insurgency, that the Iraqi people are capable of governing themselves, and our continued presence there is not only harmful to the Iraqis, but also makes our nation a less safe place.
There's an American artist, musician by the name of Michael Franti, and he has a song, and there's a line in that song that goes, "You can bomb the world to pieces, but you can't bomb the world to peace."
Well,
that around here. Mama don't allow no peace vigiling around here. We don't care what Mama don't allow, going to peace vigil anyhow. Mama don't allow no peace vigil in here. Mama don't allow no peace vigil in here. Well, Mama don't allow no peace vigil in. You can't do that here. Well, we won't do it anyway.
While I was in the Navy, I began to find out some things about my country's history. In 1952, the United States overthrew a democratically elected government of Mossadegh in Iran.
I don't think that would happen. I think that it's just a scare tactic that's just going on right now. There's too much at stake for us to do that, and realistically, I believe that handling Iraq is taking a toll, and there's no way that the troop morale would want to go into Iran and invade. I think that would just be highly unlikely.
My statement is that we are all American citizens, and it is our First Amendment right to petition our government for redress of wrong.
We can't have Iraq.
Iran, we demand that our government open up diplomatic relations with Iran. Do not kill any more innocent members of humanity.
I hope not. I think that it's hard to tell, because if the president does attack Iran, or if the United States does attack Iran, the people of the United States won't stand for it. They're too frustrated with Iraq, but the president seems to do whatever he wants without any regard for the American population. So I think it's hard to tell.
There was over 1,000 people at my son's service when he was killed, and they want him to be the hometown hero. But they have turned their backs on me, and it's really hard. I live in a town called Vacaville, and it's right by an Air Force base, and it's very conservative, and I've practically become a pariah in my town. I was telling the audience that this week 4 negative letters were written to the newspaper, and they published them about, how, I'm a traitor, and I should just be quiet because my son died. My son died to make America free, but I should be quiet. But I wrote a letter to the editor yesterday, and I just said, what I'm doing is right, and you can write all the letters to the editor you want, and it's not going to make me stop. Because I know what I'm doing is right, and I know my son wants me to do it. One guy said that I was spitting on the graves of millions of Americans who have died in war by what I'm doing. And it is really hurtful, but, that nobody's going to stop me. What are they going to do, kill me? They've already done something worse. There's a lot worse things than dying.
I don't think the United States will attack Iran, because I think George Bush understands that he's already in way over his head in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there's issues going on with other countries too, with Korea, with China, with the Balkans. And I think that he understands that if he did that, then he would just completely destroy the United States military. And I think he already has enough of a problem with the Americans supporting the war that he perpetrated in Iraq, that I think he knows that absolutely no one would support a war in Iran. And there's no need to go into Iran. The United States has no business. The United States has no business in Afghanistan or Iraq. The American people know that. That's why the numbers are so low for the actual people who support still. 26%. Those are the people who are going to stay by George Bush no matter what choices he makes.
This country is a good country, but this country is not the greatest country on earth. We've been told from the time we go into school that this is the greatest country on earth, that there's a piece of cloth hanging from a pole with stripes on it, and we should be willing to die to defend a piece of cloth. And our country is founded on murder. As soon as we stepped on this continent, we started murdering people. We've had the stain of slavery. We've almost exterminated our native population. And our country is constantly constantly at war or covertly murdering other people. And this military-industrial complex is only to make people rich. You know, don't sign up. Don't put yourself in the hands of the maniacs in power who care nothing for you. They care nothing for you. They care nothing for your family. And when you go over to Iraq, they hope you die, because then they don't have to pay you your VA benefits. Another thing I would tell you is that your recruiter, whatever he says to you, is a lie. He's only telling you this to get you to sign up because he has quotas to make, and he doesn't care about you either. And the last thing I would say is, don't do it to your mom.
These days, the crowded crossroads of U.S. metropolises, including New York, Washington, and Chicago, is full of unsatisfied Americans who hold anti-war placards to express their opposition against continuation of war in Iraq. Is the best place for peacekeeping groups to organize symbolic demonstrations and attract the attention of U.S. citizens to the uselessness of the Iraq War and its ominous achievements. Many tourists with her anti-US and anti-Israeli slogans and speeches in front of the White House in more than 20 years. She's living in a tent in Lafayette Park near the White House. She doesn't sleep more than 3 hours a day.
Israel wants to bomb Iran because Iran said it's building a nuclear reactor, and Israel has the bombs. Israel selling nuclear weapons to India, missiles, South Africa, Taiwan. They don't stop Israel, who not comply with the UN resolution on non-proliferation treaty. And they demanding openly to bomb Iran, to bomb North Korea. It's Israel, it's covered up. They keep putting more walls, more settlements, and they say Iran is the threat. Sharon, 2 weeks before God put him in a hospital, he said, Sharon, we're going to make a fireball out of Iraq like we did out of Iran, like we did in Iraq.
if he's a champ.
Well, my feeling is one of sadness. Sadness that we've made the same mistake in Iraq that we made in Vietnam 40 years ago. These young people that come back from Iraq, most of them they're not able to talk about what they've experienced, and they're very isolated, just like we were. And I think the problems that these guys are going to have are much worse than what we had from coming home from Vietnam. In some slight ways, it's a little bit better. People who oppose the war don't blame the soldiers, and that in the 60s in Vietnam, they often blamed us, the soldiers, who didn't start the war, didn't want the war, just got forced into it. They blamed us, and that part is better. But these guys are going into Iraq 3 times, 4 times, and they see their friends blown apart, and they're going to be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, I think, many, many more times than we did.
We have flown the air like birds and swum the sea like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth like brothers.
I feel very sorry, very sad and very sorry for these people for having to go through what they have, and the adjustment problems that we face from Vietnam are going to be much worse, and they're going to last much longer. For 30 or 40 years, we're going to have people committing suicide, abusing alcohol and drugs, committing crimes, domestic violence. Every measure, divorce, every measure of social problems are going to be worse for this group of young people. And it was unnecessary and it's unfortunate.